Welcome to the Burisch Archive Podcasts, a series of focused discussion around the controversial claims of Dr. Dan Burisch. Today's subject, the MJ12 Minutes.
We are undertaking a massive and really complex deep dive today. We're looking at a document titled All MTG Minutes Combined.pdf.
And this document, it alleges to contain verbatim discussions from the absolute highest level of a secret global governance structure.
Exactly. Specifically, it's documenting their proceedings across 2015 and 2016.
So our mission today is to try and methodically and impartially navigate these incredibly detailed claims. And we have to accept right from the start, this is deeply controversial stuff.
It is. And the nature of the source just adds another layer of, well, strangeness. These weren't leaked internal memos.
No, they were presented as minutes captured from a live text feed, a live feed discovered on a public forum.
That's right. It paints this picture of a shadow world that, for all its alleged power, sometimes operated with this bizarre, almost public-facing transparency.
And the group itself, they identified as the Reformed North American Consistory of Majestic. We should probably unpack that name.
We definitely should. It's a key part of the story.
And the logistics of these meetings, they just underscore the eccentricity of it all. The minutes often place these high-level summits in Las Vegas.
Right, in Las Vegas, often in these unconventional spots like the recently closed Sahara Hotel and Casino. They apparently got access during that brief transition period before it was rebranded.
Which begs the question, why hold meetings that are supposedly managing global crises in a casino, even a closed one?
It speaks to a need for, I guess, non-traditional security, maybe a bit of dramatic flair. But the protocol itself is even stranger.
You mean the music?
The music. According to the minutes, many meetings began with the playing of the song Magic by Olivia Newton-John.
And right at the center of this whole reform structure was Dr. Dan Burisch. He was identified as MJ1.
Chief of Operations, the COO.
Okay, so let's unpack this strange transition in governance. Because this period, 2015-2016, it wasn't business as usual for them.
No, it was a complete shift away from the legacy of the original Majestic 12 concept. They were moving into this new entity, the Consistory.
So what did this reformation actually entail? Beyond just a name change.
Well, it implies a real push for internal accountability, almost a rebellion against the old absolute power structure. You see the hierarchy defined pretty clearly.
There's Anne, the first seat, everyone. She's the nominal head.
She is, but Dan, as co-MJ1, he clearly operates a very powerful faction. There's a point where he explicitly warns her, with me goes 23 of your consistory.
So this wasn't just bureaucracy, it was a hostile internal political environment.
Absolutely, a classic power struggle.
So what specific reforms did Dan's faction manage to push through? What demonstrates this supposed shift toward transparency?
The biggest one, the most profound reform documented, is the motion to completely revoke the procedures for SOPHIs.
SOPHIs, that's secret orders for immediate execution.
Exactly. And historically, these were orders that could be enacted unilaterally by fiat, by any single-seated echelon member. Think of it like a form of executive martial law, but enacted by just one person inside this group.
Revoking those orders. That sounds like a logistical nightmare. What if an agent has been running a deep cover operation for years based on an old SOPHI?
That's the core of the problem they created for themselves. The minutes state this revocation required all agents, anyone working on any old SOPHI orders, to report in for immediate clarification.
So it was designed to expose every rogue element, every secret op running outside their direct control.
It was an attempt to fundamentally wipe the slate clean, to centralize control under their new charter.
And this new charter, its ambition for transparency was, well, pretty radical for a supposed shadow government.
It was. They aimed for actionable business to be, and I'm quoting here, completed openly where absolutely possible, with as much access to the public as possible.
And they formalized this by giving the public a proxy seat at the table, seat 9.
Yes, seat 9. This seat was designated to represent public interests, and it was proposed as the ultimate tiebreaker for formal policy motions, specifically if there was a 4-4 deadlock.
But here's the thing. If Dan, the COO, is admitting in these same minutes that he can influence seat 9's position, isn't that just window dressing? How effective can a public voice be if the chief of operations can just sway it to his side?
And this is where the skepticism is really necessary, and the minutes don't shy away from that complexity. Dan recognizes seat 9 as a lever, yes, but the existence of the seat still forces the consistory to at least consider a public viewpoint, even a filtered one.
So it formalizes a mandate for transparency, even if it's flawed.
Right. It suggests Dan's goal wasn't necessarily true democracy, but to dismantle the absolute power of the first seat and the other members. He was using the idea of public interest to gain internal operational control.
That distinction is fascinating, using public interest as a tool for internal political leverage. Okay, let's shift from their internal politics to global politics, because these minutes move very quickly into managing active, complex global crises in real time.
They really do. They sound less like a secret society and more like a parallel UN Security Council, but one with its own armed forces.
The level of detail on the geopolitical actions in 2015 and 2016 is staggering.
It is. The documents report specific military standoffs, like Russian bombers being detected off the Alaska and California coasts in July 2015.
And they also document active Middle East intervention.
Yes, including the strategic movement of an armed chopper force into Qatar, positioned so it could strike targets across Yemen, Iraq, and Iran.
We're talking about alleged intervention in real, documented global conflicts. And they're documenting the first seat and placing a direct call to Qasem Soleimani,
The commander of the Iranian Quds Force. With Dan's advisory team apparently monitoring the audio, it implies they're acting as a shadow foreign policy apparatus.
One of the most critical flashpoints detailed is the tension between Turkey and Russia, right over the Turkish-Syrian border.
Yes. The problem was twofold. First, you had conflicting radar displays between the two nations. And second, the alleged passage of weapons and oil across that border to Daesh, to ISIL.
So how does a supposedly secret U.S.-based group like the Consistory insert itself into a conflict between two major powers like Turkey and Russia?
Well, Dan, as COO, allegedly engaged directly with President Erdogan. The minutes suggest the consistory pushed for agreed-upon image profiles, essentially shared intelligence data.
So they could use U.S. satellite surveillance to enforce a negotiated peace.
That was the idea. Their role was to provide the critical, unbiased intelligence needed to stop two nations from escalating a border dispute into something much, much larger.
The sheer audacity of it, though. They're acting as a proactive mediator that holds crucial intelligence leverage over actual nation-states.
And this is where Dan's documented ethical stand comes into play. While he's doing all this, he expresses this profound concern about the conflicts being framed as a slow march toward a third world war over religions.
And he explicitly states his refusal to engage in slaughter.
Yes, he asserts that his team's job is to create conditions where lethal force doesn't require using.
That's a very high moral ground to take while you're also managing armed chopper forces in Qatar.
Exactly. It's a deep dichotomy. Is he using military leverage to achieve diplomatic ends? Yes. Is he attempting to de-escalate global conflict?
Yeah.
Also, yes, the minutes portray a complex figure who seems to view his role as stopping global self-destruction.
And it seems like he's fighting these wars to preserve the global economic system, which brings us to our next major point.
The economic panic.
Right. Let's pivot from shooting wars to the economic panic that the minutes reveal was happening at the same time. The consistory was reportedly bracing for a massive financial collapse.
This section reveals extreme instability. Dan declares that the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of England are effectively insolvent.
Insolvent. That's not just a liquidity issue. That's a statement that the very foundations of the Western financial system are rotten.
It is, and he warns of a critical need for a reset point or a complete reorganization.
What specific scenario were they trying to avoid? What necessitated this kind of drastic talk?
The minutes outline a very specific vulnerability, the global reliance on the petroleum economy. They posited that if the big oil companies fail, maybe due to a sudden loss of foreign supply, the stock market would plunge to depths not seen since 1929.
A 1929 level collapse. That's not a recession. That's immediate catastrophic poverty.
That's the consequence they described. Immediate widespread loss of homes, mass starvation, especially in impoverished regions that depend on that tiny trickle-down effect from oil and mineral trade.
So the system is so interconnected that cutting off the top causes the bottom to starve almost instantly.
That's the picture they paint.
And this is that immense paradox. Dan, the COO, is a pro-green scientist who inherently distrusts the fossil fuel economy.
Yet his primary job is to keep that same fragile petroleum-based system from imploding on itself.
And their strategy reflects that desperate balancing act.
It does. Dan and Marcia McDowell, who is FinM, they detail how China is leveraging these huge, practically unlimited money sources giving cash to greedy foreign governments.
And in exchange, China demands natural resources at hugely reduced rates.
Right. So China is essentially funding the global economy by acquiring resources on the cheap, exploiting developing nations in the process.
How does that predatory system help the consistory avert a collapse?
It creates a temporary, stabilizing cash flow. The minutes suggest that while the model is exploitative, it ironically ensures a small, continuous stream of money reaches those poorest regions. If that flow stopped, the starvation would be immediate.
So they're managing a situation where the only way to avert a total collapse is to allow this slow, exploitative leverage to continue.
They're trapped. They're trapped by the very system they're trying to reform.
So when they try to pivot to clean energy or transparency, they hit a financial wall. The minutes say they held back on releasing the names of banks involved in green finance. Why?
Because those clean energy portfolios are deeply intertwined with vast China investments. Releasing the names or pushing too aggressively toward a green economy would immediately trigger the very collapse they are fighting so hard to prevent.
That makes the shift from global finance to future technology even more jarring.
Let's look at the parts related to future knowledge and alleged extraterrestrial engagement.
The minutes address this directly with what they call the STARS SOPHIs, documents related to potential ET contact.
And Dan recommended holding their release until a definitive date no later than February 1st, 2016.
Yes, and the reason for the hold just highlights the immense stakes in the confusion. They needed a definitive determination of whether the individuals at the moon are human lineage extraterrestrials or true aliens. So they're not just dealing with beings from another planet. They're dealing with an existential identity crisis. Are these visitors from deep space, or are they descendants of humanity who evolved somewhere else?
That's the question. The minutes even state they were actively teaching these individuals modern English to evaluate the totality of their intentions.
So if they're engaging in all of this, high-stakes diplomacy, managing wars, fighting financial collapse, what's the ultimate endgame for Dan and Marcia? Just maintain secrecy forever.
The minutes actually suggest a planned obsolescence of that secrecy. Dan details their accomplishments: averting economic freefall, strengthening international relationships like ASEAN, gaining influence with over 120 nations.
They felt they had stabilized the world enough that control could be relaxed.
It seems so. And they had a very specific plan for how this material would eventually be released.
The podcast.
The podcast. They revealed they were, and again I'm quoting, looking to link the first audios from the Consistory with radio or podcast program she and I are designing.
Which suggests a calculated, controlled move toward public engagement. A recognition that this level of management couldn't stay secret forever.
Absolutely.
We've covered such an incredible scope in these alleged minutes, from the internal power struggle over revoking SOPHIs to high-level diplomatic interventions and this near panic over global financial insolvency.
I think the key takeaway for you, the learner, is the detailed logic they use to justify global policy. This alleged shadow government wasn't acting just for ideological reasons. They were constantly prioritizing short-term stability to avert catastrophe.
Even if it meant compromising their long-term goals, like transparency and clean energy.
Exactly.
So the final provocative thought for you to mull over. The minutes reveal this fascinating perspective on global catastrophe. They state that the 2012 time cycle transition was merely physical, pure and simple. Physics. A consequence of our relationship to the plane of the galaxy.
So if our biggest existential threats are governed by orbital mechanics and physics, how much actual free will do major world leaders possess in charting humanity's destiny?
We encourage you to consider how a view like that, which places global fate in the hands of astronomy rather than policy, would fundamentally reshape the entire mandate of a governing body.
It changes everything.
Thank you for listening to the Burisch Archive Podcasts. Check back for further detailed analysis on other aspects of Dan's claims and their extraordinary connection to our current understanding of our relationship to the extraordinary.